Um, okay, so if you want to, you can get this document. It's called a Jamboard from the other materials section right here, and you can follow along. So I thought I'd read each one and talk a little bit about each one, make a few little preliminary notes, and you can ask questions if you want to. So the first one that you were supposed to look at was sonnet number 18, and it's a super famous one. Maybe you've heard this line before, the opening line, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" It's pretty famous. So I'll read it and then we'll talk about it a little bit. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou ownest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee." All right, so it's a romantic poem in its sentiment about love and beauty. We will remember, of course, that Shakespearean sonnets are broken into quatrains and a couplet. And if I sort of visualize that, then it's easier for me to look at the separate sections and see the structure and the progression of ideas through the poem. So the first part asks a question: should I compare you to a summer's day? And she's talking to someone else, right? Thee means you. And so he's saying, let me compare you to a summer's day. Now, whenever we see seasons, going back all the way to the summer reading, we always think about the sort of like progression of life, that spring is like our youth, and summer is like our peak, and then autumn is kind of like, middle age, and then winter is like death. So as soon as I see a season, I have to at least have in the back of my mind that summer is somebody's peak. And sure enough, in this poem, it represents the beauty of the beloved, the person that they're talking to. So he says, I'll compare you. I'll compare you to a summer's day, but you are more lovely and more temperate. You are more pleasing. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. So the reason that you're better than a summer's day is because the wind blows and summer is over too soon. And so you aren't like that. Your beauty is eternal. I don't know, Valentine's Day is coming up. Y'all should maybe put one of these in your pocket or something. So then the next quatrain continues that idea. We know that the main idea is set up in the first quatrain, and then we look to see what's happening in the second quatrain. It's usually an extension, another metaphor, a deeper dive into that idea. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines. That's the sun, right? So he's still talking about summer. And often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. So he says, summer, the sun can be too hot. There's always problems like with the summer. But the next quatrain is a shift. There's the volta here at line 9, right where it's supposed to be. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, but your beauty and your peak will never fade. You'll always stay beautiful to me, nor lose possession of that fair thou ownest, your complexion and the beauty. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So death won't even be able to claim you, because I'm going to immortalize you in these eternal lines, and your beauty will be etched here forever. And it's not a lie, because here we are still reading it hundreds of years later. So death won't even be able to completely claim you. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, well, here we are breathing and we can see it. So long lives this, he means this poem and her beauty. And this gives life to thee. So you'll always be beautiful and you'll always be immortal because I have put you into this poem and you will last forever. So hopefully you can see how looking at the quatrains helps you figure out what's happening in the poem and how the ideas are progressing until we get to the couplet, which is always like a sort of the point of the poem. Also, let me point out, we were talking about this on Tuesday, that most Renaissance poetry at the end has a hopeful note. This one's hopeful throughout. You know, he's just adoring her. In the other poems that we looked at for today, kind of like the top part is sort of negative about time and death and stuff like that. And then the ending part kind of has a little more uplifting element. If you have any questions on the sonnets while I'm going through them, just put them in the chat or something, and then I'll address them before I move on to the next one. Okay, so then the next one is number 29. And 29 goes like this. When, in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in scope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least, yet in these thoughts myself almost despising. Haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Okay, so this is one of those poems that has kind of like a, you know, sour overtone at the beginning. The first quatrain says, when I'm in disgrace, not just with fortune, and here they don't mean money. That's a dollar sign. I'm gonna put an X through it. I'm not too great with the tool. I know you can put a post-it, but I don't know. You'll understand because I'm talking about it. He doesn't mean money. Fortune is capitalized, and so what's meant here is the goddess Fortune. The goddess Fortune is the goddess of fate. And the ancient Greeks believed that when she spins her wheel, it lands on some, you know, event. And so that's how they described fate. We have the Wheel of Fortune game show. They're named it after mythology. And so people just thought, well, if something bad happens, oh, here comes a mudslide. Oh, Fortune and her wheel. Oh, she's horrible. Or something good happens, Fortune smiled on you and her wheel gave you some, you know, benefit. So he's saying, when in disgrace with fate and with men's eyes, so when I feel like I'm not being treated well by either other men or fortune, I all alone beweep my outcast state and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries. So I cry to myself all alone and, you know, feel sorry for myself about my situation. And even God isn't listening because you have deaf heaven. And I look upon myself and curse my fate. So when I'm in that state, we call this the, I will make a post-it on this one. We call this the speaker's situation. And luckily in the Shakespearean sonnet, we see it in the first quatrain. What is the speaker's situation? That's going to guide the whole sonnet. In other poems, sometimes you have to read more than the first 4 lines to figure out the speaker's situation, but that's always something that you can be looking for. So then the second quatrain right here is continuing that idea. When he feels sorry for himself, he says, when I'm in that state, I start thinking about well, I wish I was more like this person or that person. I wish I was wealthy like this person or smart like that person, or I wish I had a lot of friends like that person. Like when we start comparing ourselves to other people, that is superhuman, right? Like we all think that. That's all mankind. When we're feeling down on ourselves, we say, "Oh, why can't I be more whatever? Why can't I have this? Why can't I have that?" And we just feel sorry for ourselves. So that's what this quatrain is about. This man's art, that man's scope or like potential. With what I most enjoy contented least. The things that used to give me joy no longer even interest me. When I'm in this state, he says, which is not a pleasant one, we have the shift. Yet, in these thoughts myself almost despising, when I'm thinking about how much I hate myself, well, most of us have been there. Haply, I think on thee. So there's the turn. I just start thinking about you. And then my state sings hymns at heaven's gate. So up here where heaven was deaf, right? Now he's singing hymns at heaven's gate. There's a little simile that's injected there, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth. The lark is the morning bird. It sings when the sun comes up. So it's like the dark night of my depression gets lifted when I think of you. And the birds start singing and heaven is smiling on me again. And then he says in the couplet, brings up the main idea. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings that then I scorn to change my state with kings. So when I feel depressed and I think of you, then I think I would never want to change my situation at all, even though all of quatrain 2 talks about how he wishes he was like other people. In the end, he says, I scorn to change my state with kings. I wouldn't even want to change places with a king because then I wouldn't know you. So also a fairly romantic poem, but this one has like the first 2/3 of it set up to be, you know, negative feelings, but they're human feelings, and we've all felt that way or some of those ways before. So we all have something, hopefully, that can break us out of it. In this case, it's this person. And again, you have that hopeful Renaissance ending. Okay, moving on to number 55. See if you can, when I'm reading this one, see if you can figure out or remember the elements that I've talked about in the last 2 poems also popping up in this poem, because there is a thread that runs through all these poems that I've chosen for you. This one goes like this. Not marble nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme, but you shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone besmeared with sluttish time. When wasteful war shall statues overturn and broils root out the work of masonry, nor Mars his sword, nor war's quick fire shall burn the living record of your memory. Against death and all oblivious enmity shall you pace forth. Your praise shall still find room even in the eyes of all posterity that wear this world out to the ending doom. So till the judgment that yourself arise, you live in this and dwell in lovers' eyes. All right, so I always break it up. So the speaker situation is here. Not marble nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme. Okay, so it's about what's going to live longer. The marble monuments and statues that we make to people that are famous or special in some way, or this poem. So it's about the lasting quality of the written word. He says, not only that, but you, whoever he's talking to, like we saw in the first poem, you shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone. I don't need to build a monument to you because I have this poem to build a monument to you. Besides, monuments get dirty. Sluttish just means dirty. Like literally dirty. Also means another type of dirty, but you already knew that. Then this next quatrain says, you know what, when war happens, the statues get blown up and we can forget about the people that they were commemorating. And Mars, the god of, this is the god of war, the Roman god of war. And so he says war will destroy all these statues, either because they are destroyed in battle or because, you know, the new regime that moves in doesn't want those statues of the old regime, and so they get rid of them. But none of those things, war won't take away this living record of your memory, this poem that I'm writing about you. Now, there is not a turn here. The turn is in the couplet, which happens sometimes in Shakespearean sonnets. Against death and all oblivious enmity shall you pace forth. So you will live beyond death because I've immortalized you in this poem. And till the judgment that yourself arise, you live in this and dwell in lovers' eyes. So the people that are reading this will keep you alive in some way until, you know, Judgment Day. So this one has some of the same qualities as the other two poems, and you should start to notice that, like thematically. Are there any questions about that or this poem? Okay. I always just picture that emoji with the straight eyes and the straight mouth whenever nobody has any questions. Okay, 60, 2 more to go. All right, so in this one, also look for the passage of time and look for the persistence of the written word. Like as the waves make toward the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end, each changing place with that which goes before. In sequent toil, all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity, wherewith being crowned, crooked eclipses gainst his glory fight, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth, and delves the parallels in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truth, and nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. And yet, to times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth despite his cruel hand. Okay, so this poem does something pretty cool. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. And this one has multiple metaphors that build on the same idea. I'm gonna put this one here. So the first one has a simile at the very beginning, and it says, just like the waves make toward the shore, so do our minutes eat away at our lives. So we know, we've all been to the shore, the waves come and you can't stop the waves. It's just, you know, part of nature, and it's just consistent and, you know, for millennia. And in the same way, the minutes hasten to their end. So the waves and the minutes are being compared there. And just like the waves on the shore eating away slowly at the rocks, so do the minutes eat away at our lives. Well, there's a positive thought for Thursday morning, but you can't do anything about it. In sequent toil, all forwards do contend. So this one makes that simile comparison, but then in the next quatrain, there's a metaphor, and it compares the chronology of time, the persistence of time, to the growth of a child. We have nativity, which means birth. Usually we hear about nativity at Christmas time, and that's just because they're talking about the birth of Christ, but nativity is a term that can apply to any birth. And it crawls, so there's the child growing up, but then eventually the child is grown, and time that gave, beginning when you're a child, you have your whole life ahead of you, so time gave you a gift. But then as you get older, it takes it back. That's what he's saying there. Oh, that's philosophical, right? I know when you're a teenager, you don't want to, like, this isn't even on your mind, but I'm 52. So I'm thinking, okay, yeah, that's for real. Now, the last quatrain builds on that idea even more. So there's like the same idea with 3 different comparisons. In the third quatrain, we have the idea that time puts a flourish on youth. So when you're young, time gives you, the greatest beauty and vibrancy of your life and transfix this flourish. A flourish is like an extra special glow, an extra special beauty. And then he says in the next line, and delves the parallels in beauty's brow. So just like time gives you the beauty of your youth, it will also dig the lines into your face and delves the parallels in beauty's brow. I don't know if you can see mine, but I have wrinkles up here and I have wrinkles right here. These ones right here. I'm trying to not frown most of the time. But yeah, so just like like time gives you the beauty, it will also take it away by giving you the wrinkles, and feeds on the rarities of nature's truth. And nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. This is a brutal quatrain. Nothing is left but for his scythe to mow. The scythe is that tool that the Grim Reaper carries. That big pole with that curved blade on it is a real tool that people used to use to cut grass. Like you would turn it sideways and just slice through it like that, almost like a baseball bat. And so the scythe is time mowing down your life. Oh, that's heavy. But, and so then we have and yet. So there's the turn. Well, okay. Too little too late, if you ask me, in this poem. But and yet to times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth despite his cruel hand of death and time, right? His I think I'll just do a post-it. Time and death. There. Okay. Bye, Marcus. Have a good day. Enjoy your 3-day weekend. So even though death and time are going to come and mow us down, we can maybe leave something behind. I think most people, when they say they want to make a difference in this world, are trying to find a way to do that. Kind of like Beowulf leaving his legend. We all want to find a mark that we can leave that will make our existence worthwhile, whether it's art or creation of something, or our children, or, for Shakespeare, it was poetry. All right, the next one is the last one, 73. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon the boughs, which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. Okay, so this one has some similarities, but the love here is a different kind of love in this poem. In the first quatrain, the situation is that you may see in me autumn, and he means that metaphorically. So it's like you might see in me autumn because I look old and I'm maybe sick, or you can tell that I'm not going to be around in the world much longer. And the metaphor is comparing that to autumn, because we have yellow leaves that are falling, the cold. There used to be birds singing, right? But now there's just these empty tree branches. So that's for sure autumn. I don't think I'm very good at writing with this. That looks like a first grader. And that's not, at least you can read it. So he says, you might see the fading of fall in me. And when you look at me, You may also see in me the twilight, the sun setting. So then there's a comparison. He's comparing himself to autumn, and then in the second quatrain, he's comparing himself to twilight, which is after the sun sets. So twilight is very near the darkness, right? Death's second self, the nighttime. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie. So you might see me as this ember. You know, if you've ever watched a campfire die out, or, you know, a fire that you had going for whatever reason and it's time to just let it go, the flames die, but the embers are still there for a little while. And so he says, if you see me now just embers and ashes, then on its deathbed. So basically, you see me like this ending. But this thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong. It makes you love me more. And if you think about it, that's true. What's the reason why we go and see loved ones who are old and, you know, before, when they're, you know, getting sick or they're in the hospital or whatever? We go and see them because we don't have much more time with them left. And we want to make sure that they know that we care about them, and also that we have some memories with them that we can share. So he's talking about that kind of situation. To love that well which thou must leave before long. So we love them when we might have to leave them before long. This could also be a metaphor for just leaving somebody, right? Like there's going to be a separation. There's going to be, I have to go, you know, 100 miles away to work or to war or something like that. So the whole thing could also be a metaphor for the separation between people. But this one has a different kind of love, but it has that same concept of aging and time taking away and the limited time that we have left. So are there any questions over any of these? I tried to go through them fairly quickly because I know that you've already read them. So discussion number 3 is going to ask you to choose a couple of these poems and write about how they show the elements of romantic poetry. So you shouldn't have to work now to figure out what the poems mean. Now you just need to think about how do they address some of the things that I was talking about in the slideshow on Tuesday that are characteristics of Renaissance poetry. Okay. Is there anything from the study guide with any of the poems from this week that you want me to talk about? I kind of did some of the things that are on the list there. Number 7 gets you toward that discussion number 3. Okay. Then the last thing I want to do is get you ready for Othello. Next time I see you on Tuesday, the 9th, we will talk about Act 1. So you should have read all of Act 1 by that time. I do think it'd be a good time to get a little bit ahead because Act 2 is for Thursday, then Acts 3 and 4 are the following Tuesday. Like it's jammed into just 2 weeks of study of Othello. So, you know, I'm not making an assignment. You don't have a discussion today. So maybe you could use the time to get ahead. There is a study guide for each act. There are 5 acts in Othello. And there's a study guide for each one. And they're usually a couple pages long. But as all the study guides, I'm not saying that you have to sit down and write out the answers to all these questions, but you should be familiar with them. I do not plan to go over and summarize the acts, because that would take our whole class period. Instead, what I plan to do, you should already come in knowing what happens in Act 1 on Tuesday. That's the basis. What I'll do is I'll talk about the significant elements of that. I put in here some quotations. I'll probably touch on those. I'll ask you, are there any of these questions that you want me to go over? There's a section for each one of the scenes in Act 1. I think Act 1 is maybe like 10 pages long, 8 pages, something like that. But it's Shakespeare, so you have to kind of like, work with it. But so there are these questions, and then at the end, there are some concepts. These same 10 concepts are going to show up on every study guide because they're topics that are persistent throughout the work that we need to think, how is the idea of secrecy evolving in this piece? So we'll be looking at these concepts throughout. So you should be prepared to do that. That's what we'll do first on Tuesday. If we have time, then I will also play the video. I have a pretty good film version of Othello, and I can play that we can kind of watch together, and that will kind of serve as a little bit of a summary. It's better, I think, with plays to visualize them because they're meant to be performed. So if we have time, we'll watch the video version of Act 1 on Tuesday. You can find the PDF. Okay, so the PDF that we've been using doesn't have Othello in it. The new textbook does. If you have this book, so many books. If you have this one, I don't know if you went to get it or if you've just been using the PDF. It's in here, but it is not in the PDF that we've been using, but it is. I did do a screen, like I did a PDF of the textbook where it is. It's not the most beautiful version, but you can go and, here's the play. So you should be able to kind of zoom in and read it. You could put it on Cami and annotate it if you wanted to make notes, but this is the textbook version with the whole thing. So you'll have to read it there. Maybe I'll find an online version that would be good and put a link in. If you see a link pop up here, it's just because I found an online version where you could read it too, which might be a little easier, especially if you're reading on a device, like on your phone or something. But the study guide's here. Yeah, it's about 9 pages or so. And then we'll do the same thing also on Thursday for Act 2. We'll talk a little bit about discussion topic 3 and move on through. I want to tell you a little bit about Othello before I sign off for today. Othello is a tragedy. There will be multiple deaths. Don't get too attached to the characters. I always tell people that when it's a tragedy. And it's about some soldiers. Othello is a soldier and he's a Moor. And a Moor is a person who is from the northern part of Africa. Now, the northern part of Africa at this time was settled by some Europeans. So when Shakespeare says that Othello is a Moor, he may or may not be of African descent, but usually he is played by a Black actor. And most scholars say that that's what Shakespeare intended for him to be Black. There are references to that in the text and some subtle racism that you'll notice. So most people envision that Othello is Black. He's a Moor from Africa. Desdemona, his wife, his new wife, as the story starts off, is the daughter of a wealthy, well-known man in Venice. And so it starts off with their marriage, and then war starts to loom. And so you'll see that building in the exposition. Act 1 is always the exposition of a play. And you'll see that there's a war that starts, and because Othello is, a general, he goes to war and the others go with him and they go to a different location. But that's the basic beginning part of Othello. You'll also meet a character named Iago. Iago is the antagonist in the drama, and he is one of Othello's captains, but he's a two-faced. I'm just going to tell you straight up because you're going to figure it out pretty soon. There's not any spoiler there. And so he acts very loyal to Othello, but he's got other devious motives in mind. So that should pretty much set up the beginning. Make sure that you read footnotes, make sure that you look at the list of characters, and as you start reading the lines of the play, go back and reference the list of characters so that you know who's related to who at first. Usually Act 1 is where you start to establish your understanding of those things. And then we'll talk about it on Tuesday. Are there any questions? No, no questions. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to sign off then for today, and I wish you all a great weekend. I hope